This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman. And you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Gotham City is out of control.
An entire city screaming in fear.
Supervillains walk the streets, preying on the innocent.
They will learn the true nature of power.
The police are powerless. A creature prowls this urban wasteland. Who's that? He moves in darkness. For some, he is a rumor, a name whispered in the corridors of the underworld, waiting for the chance to strike. Let every criminal know the acid taste of fear.
You crazy! Bat! Giant bat!
Gotham has forgotten what justice means. The Dark Knight is here to remind them. Who are you? Batman. Good guys wear black.
Welcome, everyone, to the DCAU Review, episode 181. I am Liam. With me, as he always is Cal. Cal, we've got an episode of Batman the Animated Series to talk about yet again this week. We've been talking about it all month long. But this week, we're not alone.
That's right, Liam. I'm glad to be here. We're continuing in our month of Batman the Animated Series reviews. We will be continuing with a review of Blind as a Bat, which we're very excited to do. And as we've been alluding all week on our social media, we have a very special guest correspondent with us this week. That's right. You may not know him by name, but you definitely, especially if you're a Batman the Animated Series fan, know his work. We are huge fans of his work. I own a couple pieces myself of his amazing artwork. He does just incredible artwork all the way around, but has done several dozens of prints based on Batman the Animated Series episodes. Joining us today is the artist, Mr. George Caltsoudas. George, welcome to the DCAU Review.
Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Yeah, it's an honor to have you on here. You're only our fourth special guest correspondent that we've ever had in the history of the DCAU Review. So over 200 episodes, guests wise, we've only had like you and three other people.
Wow.
We're happy to have you on here, and we'll be talking a little bit about introducing those listeners maybe who aren't familiar with you specifically, and talk a little bit about your work in just a second here. I guess the first question we can talk about is you've done a lot of releases. Most recently, you've been working with Bottleneck Gallery. I know you've done some stuff with Mondo in the past. I think your most recent release, you did something was it for New York Comic Con? Is that what
Yes, yeah.
What that piece?
A bigger print. Yeah, it's just the final piece. Just done all the episodes I could do, and then I just got asked just do one with all the characters, just all of them. Awesome. I forgot a few, but it's got mostly all of them.
Well, it's a fantastic piece. It features Batman in the middle. It's got like this orange gold hue to it. As you mentioned, features all those characters. The releases that you did before that, I think was the one that had it was mainly all the new Batman adventures and
the last batch. Yeah, it was, I think, out of the 10, and then I think the 8 of them were the newer series, which I wanted to do for a long time. And then it was supposed to be a mixture of like the best episodes from season 2 and season 3. I just like referring to the new animated adventures as season 3 to make it easier, because I always forget what it's called exactly. If it's the Batman Adventures, the new animated, I can't remember. So eventually, though, when I was trying to narrow it down, I was finding that a lot of and no offense to season 2 content, but a lot of the best ones seem to be the Harley ones, and it was starting to look like it would be too many Harley posters, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to make sure I got a lot of different characters that fans wanted to see, like the younger Robin and Nightwing. So eventually it ended up being mostly from the last season, and then it's just Harley's Holiday, and what else am I looking at here? And there was one other one. Oh, and Trial, of course. You got to do Trial.
That's the one. That's the piece that I bought. Actually, I thought.
Oh, really? That's my favorite one. I think I'm the proudest of that one.
It's so good.
Incredible.
Yeah. Just a fantastic piece. I mean, all of the work was really good. I think the one that you did for the Mr. Freeze piece that you did too was really stunning. And I know the Growing Pains piece, even though it's just Robin and Annie, that's Liam's favorite, one of Liam's favorite episodes. And I know that meant a lot to him also.
Yeah, that was one where it's just like I wasn't sure, like, oh, how would you do a poster of that episode, because it's such a specific, like, narrative driven story, but just like that simple, like, as I don't know from a production standpoint how simple it was, but just that sort of simple image of Robin with Annie and just sort of the mud and the clay sort of at the bottom and sort of swirling around them. I love that. Yeah, that episode's really special to me as as from when I was a kid. So that's definitely my personal favorite that I had to that I was just so impressed with when I saw that.
Yeah, I love that Robin design too.
100%, I love it.
So cute. It's weirdly it works better. Somehow it's more cool and edgy than college student Robin. I don't know how or why. It just works. Yeah, I love. Yeah, I mean, I'm really proud of the newer batch, because the newer batch I actually got to work on them as posters, thinking of them as prints that would become prints, right? Like that, like I was commissioned to do these. Whereas the first run, it was never intended to be like posters. Like there were other people doing things like Phantom City Creative has done all those gorgeous posters with Mondo. And so I just sort of would look at like what's happening currently every year. Like in October, there's this Inktober kind of thing that artists do. And some of them do specifically Bat-Tober. And so it's just like, like a challenge, right? Like every day do a sketch of like Batman in black and white ink or whatever. And so I was thinking of different challenges like that. This was back in, I think, 2015 or 2016. And I thought I need to do something to just have content to be putting up every day on Instagram to get more followers, to get more eyes on me. And at the same time, I saw that the Batman the Animated Series episodes were up for free on Amazon. And so I just, I'll watch these again. I haven't watched these ever since I was a kid, I guess. And oh my God, I just fell in love. And I thought, I'll do that. It'll just be a challenge every day. After work, I'll get home, 8 o'clock, I'll eat a bit. And then from 9 p.m. to like 12, sometimes 1 in the morning, I would just draw a single sketch, like a quick digital sketch of like each episode. And the challenge was to do all the episodes of season 1. Of course, I then realized that season 1 has 60 episodes. But I did all of them. And then I tried to, like, a lot of people keep asking me, are these as prints? Are you selling them as prints? And I was like, no. And I didn't want to do I wanted it to be official, not like, So I asked them all about it if they wanted to do them like little maybe cards, because they weren't meant to be like posters, right? I didn't do them in a way that was perfect or really perfectly rendered. They were quick. And so eventually they had to ask Phantom City if they were okay with it. I guess maybe they weren't, so that didn't happen. And then Bottleneck came along and he was asking about doing different stuff like Disney and Batman and whatever licenses he had, Joe at Bottleneck. And then he said, kind of like those Batman prints he did. And I said, well, why don't we just do those? And maybe he suggested it, I don't remember. And then obviously 60 was too many, so we narrowed it down to like half, so it was 30, so it was a lot. And I kind of tweaked a few of them like a little bit, made them a little better, but they were still never meant to be like posters. So they're a lot more graphic and simplistic, but in some cases it looks good because it still fits the deco vibe of the show. And then this second time around, it's more nicely rendered. There's more detail. It's tricky when you're doing that though with these character designs. It's like it's a hard balance. Like how much is too much three-dimensional? Like you want to three-dimensionalize them to a certain extent, so it feels more cinematic. It feels like there's more kind of loving care put into it. But if you do it too much, it starts to get that weird, like cheesy DVD cover vibe, like too airbrushing. And so it's you always find yourself kind of over rendering, then erasing and reducing, and kind of finding that balance.
Absolutely. That's incredible. I love hearing that. And it's funny because I've seen some of those earlier earlier Batman animated series prints that you did. And one of the things that I noticed is that most of them, or a lot of them, seems like you intentionally didn't feature Batman on all of them.
Yes, that was part of the challenge. I was like, I have to avoid, it was like a rule I put in my head, I put on myself. I was like, if worst comes to worst, I'll only allow myself one Batman. And I think I cheated. I did him twice. I did the one where he's in the straitjacket in Arkham, because I just thought, oh, that's so iconic. That's just like the best thing ever. And it's such an unusual way to see him. So I thought, well, that's okay. That's allowed because it's not the usual way that we see Batman. And then the other one was again when he was like like a knight on like a Pegasus, right? The black. Yeah, in that Riddler episode. There was nothing else good from that episode to me besides the visual. So I thought I'll do that because again, that's like an unusual view of him. So yeah. And then this time around I just did I had him in there, but like,
Still, I think what I love about him, I feel like, is he isn't. You can tell these are Batman posters, but he's not the focus of the posters. Which so many people obviously are Batman fans, but even more so, I think that you have people that are endeared to him because of the wide variety of rogues, and they love these stories because these stories appeal to them more than just, yes, they're about Batman, but oftentimes some of the best episodes of this series didn't focus necessarily on Batman. So to me, whether it was intentional or not, I appreciate that because it really does. Batman, the animated series fans can look at these posters and identify them immediately and go, okay, this is from, for example, this week's episode, Blind as a Bat, you did literally only features the Raven helicopter. That's such a huge piece. It doesn't have Batman, doesn't have the Penguin. It doesn't have any identifiable thing other than this big helicopter. So true Batman the animated series fans will recognize it. Other people might look at it and go, what is this? I'm not quite sure what I'm looking at. But I think as a true fan, you can appreciate it. So we're talking all about this. Head over to George's Instagram. You can check out his whole a bunch of prints. He does, as he's already mentioned, not just Batman stuff. He's done stuff for Star Trek and Disney and a whole bunch of other projects as well. So it's Caltsoudas, Caltsoudas. Go follow him on Instagram also. But he's going to be joining us today to talk about our episode, as we already mentioned, Blind as a Bat. George, just briefly, like, what was your introduction? Obviously, you just mentioned rewatching it a couple years ago, but what was your introduction to Batman the Animated Series as a kid?
Well, I'm old enough to have grown up with it as a kid. It did. My thing, a lot of people, when they reference this show, and they reference it with so much love that they feel it's like the best version, and it's like they're the quintessential. For me, without offending anyone that worked on it, because I love it, I grew up right at that time. I was like 6 years old when like 1989 Batman came out, and that was my first actual visual introduction to it. Like, I, as a kid, had caught my grandpa watching Superman one day on TV at night in Toronto, right? We lived in Canada, and I just thought that Superman was, just like there's Zorro and there's whatever, it's a superhero. It's just him. I didn't know there were other superheroes. And then my dad, I was like, he was an artist, and I was like, can you draw me Superman? He was like, Superman? He's so lame. Like, I'll draw Batman instead. I was like, what do you mean Batman? Who's Batman? There's a Batman? And at the time I was also obsessed. I loved like vampires and Dracula and Dark Shadows reruns. And so in my head, I imagined that Batman was like this like dark, like vampire kind of Superman guy who was like Dracula and had a castle, and then my dad was like, he's got a car. So I was thinking like some kind of like, So then he starts drawing him, and then like he's kind of like drawing me like this like Adam West thing, which I didn't know yet. I was like, oh, okay, well, that's all right. I wasn't expecting that. Okay. And then he draws the ears on last, right? He's like devil ears. I'm like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool, I guess. I don't know. Not what I was imagining, but okay, sure, whatever. And then the trailers came out for Tim Burton's Batman, and I just lost my collective, you know what? It was like in the comic falling off the side. And it was like, because that was exactly what I imagined in my head, right? When it's like the bat's flying, like he's Dracula, and he does the cape and like goes over to the girl, and then there's like this evil Joker guy and this sexy, cool black car, and the whole city looks like it's like castles upon castles, and it was nuts. Mm-hmm. And my dad was just kind of sitting there, right? Like, oh, that's not like proper Batman. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was just like loving it. I was jumping off the sofa. I was like, oh, man. And so I loved that. I didn't get to see it in theaters because I was too little. But then when it came out on VHS, my dad kind of hid it, and I found it one day and watched it, and was just in love with it. And then around the same time, they then started playing reruns of the 1960s Batman show. So I loved watching that when I got home from school. And then I guess the animated series was around the time that the second Batman Returns movie was coming out, which was also exciting. And people, I don't know how old you guys are. If you guys were you kids when it came out, or a little later when it was?
Liam was born right during season 2. I'm 4 years older than him, so I was watching Batman the Animated Series when it was running on television. So. Okay.
So like for people who don't know, although I guess most people do know who are listening to this, like because they're probably around our age or older, or like the recent excitement that you just saw with the new Batman trailer, right? Mm-hmm. If you take that and then you combine that with the excitement that was around the second Nolan one with Joker, The Dark Knight, you combine those and then do that times 10. That was the energy around that movie at the time, the first one. And so then by that point, there was then Returns was coming out, and then they just started playing, like they were trailers for this animated series show where Catwoman kind of looked like the Catwoman from the movie and Penguin, and then the rest looked Joker, I guess, kind of again like Jack Nicholson, and the rest were like these other characters that I didn't even know, right? Because we weren't reading the comics yet. I didn't know there were comic books, so like Poison Ivy and Two-Face, and I didn't even know. So for me, I was introduced to the rest of the world and the Rogues Gallery through the cartoon before ever finding the comics. So for me, it was like a trifecta. It was like the Holy Trinity, right? Like 1989 was the father, Adam West was the son, and the animated series was the Holy Spirit. It was like it was all three of those things I was experiencing simultaneously, and I loved all of them in different ways. So that was like my introduction. I just remember, and I caught it from the start. I think the first one was with Catwoman, with the claw lady.
Red Claw.
And then the Penguin one. I guess they showed those first because the movie was coming out. Even though that wasn't the production order, which is what I went with when I did the sketches. So that was it basically for me.
That's awesome. I mean, it's not one the same, but very similar to our experience as well. And just like we have a love for the 66 Batman as well. We were not old enough to watch the Keaton movies, but I think both of us have grown to appreciate both their place and like how lovable both of those movies, and then a little less on Forever and Batman and Robin, but still a place for Batman regardless. But that's pretty awesome. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, as we all know, and probably everybody listening knows, but that Keaton movie is a lot of what they were able to do in the animated series as far as the some of the darker tone of the episodes and all of that. They were allowed to do that because they got to point to this very successful Tim Burton, Michael Keaton movie and go, we're emulating that. Like we want it to feel similar to that. And so with that the Keaton movie and the animated series kind of go hand in hand, even though Tim Burton didn't directly have much involvement, with the series at all, but he, without that movie, there probably isn't an animated series, at least not in the sense that it became. So yeah, those things going hand in hand makes a lot of sense. And we will get to our review in just one moment, but I did have one final question for George here before we move on. And I think you already mentioned maybe what your favorite that you've done was, but if you can give us just a couple of your favorite prints or posters that you've worked on when it relates to Batman the Animated Series, I'd love to hear at least your top three, or at least three that you really loved. If you don't have to rank them 1 to 3 if that's too hard, but if you have a couple that you love, we'd love to hear that.
I do love the trial one. I love how it turned out,
Mm-hmm.
because that's one that Phantom City Creative did for Mondo that I thought was really gorgeous. I love almost all of those, but I just loved how that one was just the rendering, and it's beautiful. And so when I had to do it as well, because it is one of the best episodes, so you have to do it. I was like, well, what am I gonna do then? I can't, you can't do the same thing. And then I watched it, and I had forgotten that there was that scene with Two-Face lighting up the lighter, and they actually did those weird colors. That even looks weirder in the. So I love that I captured that. I'm happy with how that turned out. I guess I like Harley's Holiday because it's just got that right energy of what is cool about Harley Quinn and why she's so popular. And like you said, most of the show was taken off from Tim Burton's cue, but then if it weren't for the 60s show, they never would have thought of coming up with Harley, right? Which is all the villains had their sexy henchwomen and girlfriends, and Harley was kind of that element from that older show, and they came up with that, and now it's she's the most popular character. It's nuts. From the older ones, the first series, I really love. We didn't get to do it officially release it because DC licensing wouldn't let us, but the one that I did for the episode Be a Clown, where I don't know if you guys have seen it, where he's on not a tricycle, what do you call it, the single
unicycle,
and he's juggling all these weapons and hand grenades and things. I just thought that was such a clever idea that I thought of, and it looks gorgeous, but we just weren't allowed because it was weapons and it was for licensing. It's not but I love that. I don't know, I can't think of I guess the very first one, because that when I sat down and thought of doing it, if that hadn't turned out well with Man Bat, then I wouldn't have gone through with it. And I just love how that, and I kind of cheated on that one because the design on that is a little bit more like the newer design from the new animated adventures, but it's a silhouette. It's okay, maybe. And then I love the latest one that I did, which is based on a piece by Kevin Maguire, which is gorgeous, which I loved, which is in the first comic book of Batman I ever found, and it had all the characters. I had to switch around a few because they had his parents at the top, and I just instead put in Mr. Freeze and Mad Hatter in that one. And then because that had Nightwing and Robin, I then thought, well, then I have to do Nightwing and Robin then from animated series. So that's why it's kind of a mix of the different season designs. Because some people mentioned that, how come Poison Ivy looks different and there's Nightwing. But that one turned out great too, I think. It's a beautiful homage to something that really got me excited about the whole world. And it captures what the best selling point, even though everything is amazing, the music and the background art and the voice actors, but I mean, without Bruce Timm's amazing chiseled deco character designs, it just wouldn't have spawned the rest of that to come together. So
thanks for sharing that. I know that's probably a big ask because I'm sure there's a part of each one that you love. So picking.
Oh no, I hate half of them. It's I look back on them and I'm like, I think especially towards the end there of 60 episodes, man, I was just kind of phoning them in the last 5 ones, which is one of the episode we're doing today. It was.
Well, I think the Demon's Quest that we'll be doing in the upcoming weeks was, I think that pair that you did was just phenomenal. So we'll continue to share them with our social media friends as well, because hey, we get a lot of likes when we post your work, believe it or not.
Oh yes, I do. Thank you.
Yes, you're helping us out.
Digital engagement. Thank you, George. All right, Liam. Well, I guess we can move on to the actual review now as we get into this week's episode. As we mentioned, Blind as a Bat, which originally debuted on here in the States, at least, was on the Fox Kids network on February the 22nd, 1993, making it the 28-year anniversary just passed.
That's right. I was less than a month old when this episode aired. Just to make anyone listening or on this call feel a little bit older, I was very young when this debuted. But anyway, yes, this we will get to the episode. I of course have our IMDb synopsis by Mike Underwood and Len Wein, directed by Dan Reba, with music by Stephen Chesney and James Stemple, and animation by Studio Junio. And that synopsis reads as such. Although temporarily blinded, Batman is still determined to stop the Penguin, who is threatening the city with a prototype attack helicopter.
A prototype attack helicopter. That's a good one.
Right. I say that's a pretty good synopsis. That's one of the things we do every week, George, is we read the synopsis on the Internet Movie Database website, and then we grade like how well that actually explains what happened in the episode. Because sometimes we get like it'll be like a sentence, and it'll be like, Batman has to stop the Joker who's doing some crimes. And like, well, that doesn't really explain what happened. But yeah, so that's a pretty good one, though. As our big points of our plot here, we have Wayne Enterprises is apparently getting into the munitions game, and they're showing off this special sort of prototype attack helicopter, as the synopsis put it, and with all these special weapons and its ability to cloak itself and not only run silently but also sort of hide itself from radar. And things seem to be going well. They're showing off the weapon. There's military people in attendance, and then all of a sudden things go a little bit awry when we see that the Penguin has hijacked the helicopter. And he's kind of going to use that. That's kind of the whole episode, right? It's just penguins hovering around in a helicopter, kind of being menacing Gotham City, and of course the side plot of it is, or the main plot, as the episode's title would tell you, is that in the melee of this first attack, as Penguin and his thugs take control of this helicopter, there's an explosion which Bruce Wayne is caught in, and that means that Bruce Wayne, and by extension Batman, is blind. And so
as of this moment, the most dangerous bird in the sky is the Penguin.
Master Bruce! Home, Alfred. Now.
But sir, you need medical attention.
No! I don't want the Wayne Tech doctors examining me. Call Leslie. Have her meet us at the house.
Begging your pardon, sir, but why so secretive?
Because I don't want anyone to find out that I can't see.
how's he gonna stop the Penguin when he's blind? So I guess big picture thoughts, George. What did you think from a plot standpoint? What stands out to you in this episode?
I think to me this seemed like it was one of those stories that sounded really cool in the writer's room when it got pitched. And then the execution is just what makes this one of the most boring, most forgettable episodes. To the point where I even forgot that it exists, and I forgot that I did a poster for it, and I just saw it on Monday for this, and I already forgot half of it. Basically, it's such a great idea, right? Like, if you're a kid too, oh no, what if our main hero goes blind temporarily? But they shoot themselves in the foot with that amazing concept by immediately giving him a gadget where he's able to see. Anyways, in infrared, which is kind of cool, but so it kind of, I guess it's kind of a bit still boring. yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, most of the tension from the episode comes towards the end when he hastily has to escape the bat plane, which has been shot down, and forgets to unplug this gadget from the bat plane foolishly. Thus, it's a race against time until the battery runs out. And I love how he's doing the whole like old thing that you would do with an old tube television, like banging it when it's like fuzzy. It's like, come on, television, work. For those listening that are not like, or that are under the age of 30, back in the day, you'd bang on your television if it wasn't working right. Now I wouldn't recommend doing that because you'll smash it. But that's what electronics back in the day, if they weren't working, you just kind of hit them in hopes that they would work again. And sometimes that would work. So that's what Batman does for like the third act of this, is just bang on this electronic piece and hope that it works. And then eventually it doesn't work. And we have to figure out how he's going to be able to fight Penguin and his goons off, not being able to see it all. But yeah, it's interesting that you said that. It's like they took this piece that was a feature of the helicopter. It's like, oh, the helicopter can make these 3D images appear. Great, awesome, that's kind of cool. But at the same time, like, wouldn't it have been a little bit more interesting if Batman just couldn't see the whole episode and then had to have to figure out how to fight crime blind? Like, that sounds a lot more interesting.
My main thing is like there's like George said, like there's an interesting nugget in here, and I'm trying to think, like, if would it be better if he was against like another villain, or if it was like a more perhaps maybe, or there was a little bit more at stake than just like a magic helicopter with laser guns is loose in Gotham City. Like if he was going up against, say, like Man-Bat or someone that's like a real physical threat to him, and he can't see, or some of the League of Assassins or something that where he's when he's robbed of his sight and he has to rely on his other senses. And maybe you even do like we've seen in other episodes, like the episodes with the ninja where they do kind of flashbacks to his training and him learning different fighting techniques. And like, so
that's a great idea.
Yeah, they're like, there's nuggets. There's like a nugget of a good thing. Like the basic idea, like you said, George, of what if Batman couldn't see and he still had to protect Gotham? Like that's a really exciting, interesting idea. And there's a lot of drama in that. But as you said, for most of the episode, he can see, it's just in red and black.
Yeah, and also it would have been great if it was about the suspense of trying to make sure that the villain doesn't find out that he can't see. So that it's advantage of that, which I feel like that's the thing I've seen somewhere else, but I don't know if it's another Batman thing or another superhero thing. I feel like that's familiar, but I mean, that idea of like, well, and they kind of touch on that because there's a point where when he's first out of commission and kind of Alfred and Leslie Tompkins are making him stay home, and Penguin wants to hold the city for ransom to prove that he means business. He blows up this bridge, and you see Bruce just like with the wraps around his eyes, just like he's like clenching his fists, and he's real frustrated listening to a report on the radio about how the city's in chaos, and they make a point of showing that Commissioner Gordon shines the bat signal, and of course he doesn't come. So we get a little bit of like the city hall side of it, where they're like, well, Batman's not coming. What do we like? How do we fend for ourselves here if he's not going to show up and save the day? Like, I think there's a lot of interesting ideas. It's just the package when it all kind of comes together is like, well, I think the last couple minutes there where it completely goes out and he's completely in the dark. And I think you get to see the Penguin be like a little bit more sinister than maybe we see him in other episodes of the series. Like he's really relishing seeing Batman at this weak point, and like for once kind of able to be like more of a physical threat to Batman than probably this Penguin normally is. But yeah, I feel like there is maybe something missing here.
100%. I think it's interesting also that maybe this is why, but it felt very, and he does have a throwaway line where he expresses some concern, but the fact that Bruce Wayne was getting into the military like vehicle business seems a little bit off character for Batman, who doesn't like guns, and that like ultimately down the road in the World's Finest episodes where he's getting, creating this partnership with Lex Luthor, we know that the reason why he doesn't want to get into this partnership with him is because he doesn't like guns and doesn't want to get into military weapons. So is this the catalyst that led to that? I guess maybe, I don't know, but it feels like that's like a no-brainer for Batman not to want to create weapons of war with guns, killing machines, So in that way, I felt like it didn't feel like true to Batman to be involved with the creation of this vehicle to begin with.
Yeah, totally. I think that definitely did ring a bell. Like, oh, this feels like more of like, this is like the Iron Man origin, right? Like he's blown up by his own weapons, and then that kind of gets him to not want to do that anymore or whatever. But yeah, it's not really, it doesn't really feel like a Bruce Wayne product, even though, he may not, the world doesn't know he's Batman, but he, like Bruce Wayne, would have an aversion to guns as well, based on, how he very publicly lost his parents. So yeah, like I said, I think there's some interesting ideas in this, especially the idea of, a weakened Batman, or in this case, a blind Batman still having to defend the city. There are like a couple of minor things. One is like, why didn't he call Robin?
Yep.
Like
those college classes are real important.
I was gonna say, was it finals week and Dick Grayson couldn't get away from final? I mean, at least he could have like flown the plane, like if I'm not saying Robin could have single-handedly solved this, it's a tough situation, but maybe he didn't have to go it alone.
Yep.
And then my other question is Leslie what kind of doctor is Leslie?
I was gonna ask you that. What is she? I was gonna ask that, but I was waiting for you to finish. Is Leslie Tompkins like a psychologist, like a therapist, or is she a doctor? Like what? I feel like it's going back and forth.
She's also a scientist. I don't know what she's over there like installing this technology and creating Batman's ocular mask. Also, she's an inventor. What else?
She can do it. Yeah, she's. I guess she has a couple different degrees, I guess, or something. She's
done sessions with Bruce, right? Where he would talk. Right, okay, and then there's her being more like a doctor in this, but then I guess she was also in one of those other episodes with the crime doctor or whatever it was, or was that someone else?
Yep. No, that was her.
And she works as like a surgeon's assistant in that episode. So she does surgeries. She does I guess regular medical doctor stuff. She's a psychiatrist.
I think it's that lazy kid thing where writers just say, whatever, it's for kids. So
they won't
kids
think about
can understand. So let's make it simple for them. Let's not get into the details of well, Bruce Wayne doesn't agree with this technology, but sometimes his teams try to pitch it and build it, and then he'll just say no. So I guess sometimes they do these lazy things, but it's not an okay excuse, I think.
Yeah, no, I definitely thought that, because it's also one of those things where I think it was like, well, we need a character who can give Batman this device that lets him see who in like our circle of already established characters. Like there's no
this would be a crime fight,
right? There's there's Robin, Alfred, and Leslie are like the three people who know that Bruce Wayne is Batman in this series.
Nowadays, this would be the spot that they bring in like Lucius Fox, who also knows Batman's secret and can do the technology thing and provide him with technology. But they didn't, obviously in this series, Lucius didn't know Batman's secret, so he didn't have a like technology guru to bring in to help them with gadgets and gizmos.
I still think this is a terrible idea. I mean, using electrodes to connect this gizmo directly to your brain's optic center?
Objection noted. May I have the headpiece, please? Those ZVF components I gave you, you wired them into this thing?
I know how to follow instructions. Just be careful with that power pack. You have to keep recharging it.
Will it work, sir?
only one way to find out.
Yeah, that all makes sense. So yeah, all together, like we said, I think there's some fun moments in it, but overall, I think it does kind of fall short. And I ended up settling on a 5 out of 10 for my plot score. What about you, Cal?
I also gave it that exact same score. George, we warned you there's a lot of agreeing on this.
I was gonna then say 5-2 since you guys are saying it, but should I be more cruel? Because I really think it is that bad in terms of
no. We want an honest. We want honesty above all.
Four.
All right.
I'll be mean. I'll make sure people will hear this, and then Bruce Timm and whoever be like, never let that guy do any artwork for Batman ever again.
If Bruce Timm is listening to this podcast, you don't have anything to worry about. It's us that have things to worry about. Trust me.
Oh, you never know, listen. You never know. But yeah, 4. I'll give it a 4. I think the writing
That's fair.
I love your idea of the ninja thing.
Yeah.
And then you wouldn't have to worry about the technology or the doctor thing anyways.
Highlighting his skill set, I think, is what is spot on, Liam. Like you have this idea of okay, he's the world's greatest detective. He's been trained by assassins in like multiple levels of karate. He's Batman, so if he has to rely on his other senses, make it an homage to Daredevil. Daredevil is also a character, and obviously depending on your interpretation or the interpretation of him, he has his special ability to somewhat see people in a similar fashion, but there are times where he has to interact with people where that sense isn't available to him, or he hadn't quite fine-tuned it yet. So there's certainly, I think, plenty of fun to have been had, or an homage to the Daredevil character that could have been done a little bit better than what they did here. Also, I get PTSD. The giant Raven helicopter was like one of the bosses in the Adventures of Batman and Robin Super Nintendo game. And I hated that level because that thing would just, first of all, it didn't make any sense. It didn't have anything to do with the level of the video game at all. And it would pop up and it's like, why is the Raven helicopter in this level? Oh, man. But yeah. So 5 from me, 5 from Liam, 4 from George.
Love it. So that will move us on to our second category, which is, of course, visuals and animation. Once again, the director for this week's episode was Mr. Dan Reba. And we have Studio Junio. I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce that as the animation studio. They were not credited with doing too many episodes of this show. They had previously done ones that we've covered, Cal, in Mudslide and Dollar in the Jar, The Underdwellers, but not too many episodes on the Bat. That being said, I think from like a model standpoint, and maybe the actual artist can speak a little bit more to this here. But like from a model standpoint, I didn't notice like a ton of inconsistencies, and especially I feel like Penguin's one of those characters that is really easy to get off model in this older style. Head sizes changing in his body proportions and stuff. But I thought for the most part, at least from a character staying on model standpoint, it's pretty consistent in this episode.
Yeah, I think the thing that I noticed that was most inconsistent was sometimes, at least for the opening scene, none of the characters had whites behind their eyes, and then all of a sudden it shifts and they all have whites behind their eyes, and then at the end of the episode again they didn't have whites behind their eyes, and that was the only thing that kind of threw me off as far as the inconsistency as far as character models are concerned. This isn't quite the Batman we saw last week, which was the more like direct Bruce Timm square jaw. It's not the one with the like long ears and the pointy cowl nose either. It's like somewhere in between there. I think it's fine. I didn't think there was too much inconsistency there as far as what that looks like. And we can talk about our favorite like visual moments throughout here, but throw it over to George because you are the artiste here on the podcast. So what were your observations from the way that the episode looked, things that you thought were good, maybe not so good? What were your thoughts?
Okay, we'll start with the positives. I absolutely love this version of Penguin out of everything that exists. Wow. I think it's just perfect. I don't know if this goes in this category, if it comes up later. the voice that this guy had for this character is so beautiful and perfect. It's like he's dapper, but there's a raspiness to it. But it's not that it's not the yucky like Danny DeVito thing. But they took that and they did a polished, dapper version of that. So I love him with the longer hair. I hate his design in the newer version where he looks too much like the classic.
That's a controversial stance, George. Amongst
Batman, he looks like that newer one looks like a Scooby-Doo character. Looks like Hanna-Barbera. Really, I love this one more. I just love the eyes and how the one is bigger, and I just love his voice. It just pierces. There's something great about it.
Oh, he's great.
I think it's the best version of everything I've seen, from all the way from the 60s show all the way to that new trailer. Like, in general, I just noticed, I guess this is one of the animation studios where the overall flow of the animation is more fluid in a way that I think Bruce Timm never liked. I think Bruce Timm generally enjoys the more kind of I don't know how you'd say it, like not boxy, but more stiff movement and kind of, you know, that kind of thing. Not that over the top 90s kind of. So there's bits where kind of Bruce just kind of like lunges forward and like lifts his head up and is like, I'm blind, because like that kind of thing. Like I think that's probably why these guys got assigned like the less kind of fun episodes out of all the ones. I love that there's a few really, really nice transitions though that are reminiscent of the Superman Fleischer cartoons. Like I can't remember all of them now, but there were just certain transitions that I thought were just really lovely. One that really stuck out was when you're just seeing these people on the street looking at the TVs in the window, the TV display, and it's the mayor on it. And then we're looking at it, and then we zoom out, and then it's like in the office of, or maybe it's Penguin, I can't remember, and like different things like that. And then they do another thing with the TV again, and you go in, and then it's Penguin, and he's in his copter. I love that. I just love those things.
Absolutely.
I think overall, though, there's a lot of scenes where they could have placed the camera in a more close-up dynamic angle so that you're not seeing huge empty spaces where people are running away from the helicopter, but it's mostly empty. Because obviously there's not enough budget or time to do lots of crowds or to draw other cars on the bridge, so it's just too long cars. right but understandable, there are restrictions, but when you have those restrictions, then you make sure to kind of crop in more closely or follow an angle where it's just the cars filling most of the frame, and maybe we're just seeing the bridge kind of gates go by, you know what I mean, a different angle. Same with the beginning, maybe it's just you've got, you know, a tighter shot on like the scientist lady, and then there's flames, and then you've got black silhouettes of people running behind the flames, so it's, you don't have to do that much work. Like it's just there's certain shots like that are very wide angle but empty, which is not very kind of not good.
It's visually it feels like you said, it feels like something's missing there. It's funny that you mentioned the bridge scene, because that was exactly, I was like, man, they lucked out. There was only one car on this one bridge stand in all of Gotham that night. It must have been at like 3 a.m. when there was nobody else awake or something like that. Like
there's a lot of that in animation in general. You see that even today, but it's the only way around that is you have to then like try and not do that. Don't show a really far away establishing shot. And, it's the shame, because the background painters, they want to do a cool full background of a city skyline, is understandable, but then if you don't have the people to fill in with, you know, it's just not the right angle. That's all it is.
That makes sense.
And I love in the end, quickly before I forget, and I'll let you guys carry through, in the end, the visual storytelling of when Alfred drops the newspaper, but then you see Bruce's hand catch it up, and you're like, I can see it again. That kind of little motif was really nice. So I like those bits, just not the emptiness.
Love that.
Yeah, I think that's something that on some of like the commentary tracks and stuff that Bruce Timm and some of the other creators will even talk about of, this character ran past like runs through the camera, and then there's like a second where it just holds on the blank background, and he's like, man, if we were making this today, I'd never do that. Like, and so I think even the creators themselves would be like, yeah, if I could, if you know, we learned, you know, they sort of learned as they went, and there's things in these older shows that if they could do it again, they could do it all over again. I'm sure they would notice, oh, well, I wouldn't do it that way, or I would cut before, you know, he runs completely out of the frame, so we aren't just staring at a background for a couple seconds and things like that. So yeah, that's a fun one that you pointed out. As far as like fun or interesting visuals, I think that final sequence, it's not like a particularly they're in like, I guess again, because they're like setting off bombs and crashing and doing like giant explosions, it had to be in like a vacant sort of like industrial district that had been abandoned. So they're like outside of this factory. I do like the sequence of the bat plane. So this is a thing for me, George. I'm not a fan of this bat plane in this original animated series.
Why?
Just because I don't think it fits aesthetically. Like, it's this like alternate 1940s world, and then Batman's flying around this like flying saucer. Like, it just doesn't. It's like he's like in a spacecraft, and everything else.
Too slick,
yeah, it's like everything else is like blimps, and like it's like a propeller airplane and things like that. And then he's in this like really slick, sweet. And I get it, because again, it's very similar sort of aesthetically to the Burton Batman one, and it's cool. And there's, you know, when it's flying against the sky, it looks awesome, and it made an awesome toy as well. We had that growing up as well, but I will say, despite my own inherent bias towards this bat plane, I will just say I did think, like, from an animation perspective, where the bat plane's sort of weaving in and out of the crowds, and just that shot of it, like where the Penguin looks up to the clouds and you see the bat plane sort of burst out and it shoots the net down on them, and then it's sort of weaving through the buildings, and we see sort of Batman's a lot of that third act. They keep cutting to Batman's point of view, and it's this red black like sonar vision that he has, and you see him sort of darting through the buildings and sort of and the plane sort of turning on its side and weaving through buildings and stuff. I think that's probably, from like an action standpoint, is maybe my favorite sequence of the episode. And then the Penguin's helicopter returning fire, and he's spinning out of control, and the wing catches on fire, and he's trying to get control, and then you're getting that alert on the screen that his battery is dying in his vision or whatever. So I think that sequence is all pretty tense and exciting.
The laser cannon! Use the lasers!
Impact. Heat damage to fuselage. Breach to hull. Extensive structural damage.
Tell me something I don't know.
65 seconds to total system failure.
Yeah, it's really good. I thought the dogfight was one of the highlights. So you have the dogfight between the Raven helicopter and the Bat plane, or the Bat-Wing. I thought that was really good. I think the visuals also, even though it's a little silly, this machine that's helping him to see, you kind of get a little bit of a similar sequence that you get in Mask of the Phantasm, where Batman puts on the costume for the first time and it's all in silhouette. This time you just get a shadow of him sort of putting on this device, and then he pulls the cowl up over top of it. Mm-hmm. And the very next scene is him in this mayor's office, just as Mayor Hill and Commissioner Gordon and Bullock are sort of scratching their heads and trying to figure out what they're going to do, because they can't get $100 million together in a couple of moments. It's like, yeah, no kidding. You can't get $100 million together.
Just what I was afraid of. According to the controller's office, we can't come close to putting that ransom together. Not without shutting down basic municipal services.
So what other options we got?
None, gentlemen. Which is why you're going to do exactly what the Penguin wants you to.
So Batman shows up, and he's standing in that classic Batman silhouette in the shadows, but he's got the red eyes this time, really giving him like this almost like evil demonic feel to him standing in the background. So it's that classic, the viewers know that something's off, obviously, and know that the red lenses are from this machine that's helping him to see, but it really creates this different stark visual than what you're normally used to, because it almost gives Batman this insidious feeling about him standing there in the shadows and him saying that they're going to do exactly what the Penguin wants you to do, But at the same time, you feel like, all right, well, Batman's here to save the day. This device is going to help him see, everything's going to be okay. But yeah, and I think ultimately him walking through, it's funny that you mentioned the Fleischer Superman cartoons, George, because I feel like this final, whatever this industrial factory that they're in is like is right out of a Fleischer Superman episode. It's, these giant metal containers that are pouring this molten liquid. And there's like a river of this molten liquid for some reason that there's like this little pathway that leads out over top of it, and lots of interesting visuals in that scene also. But Batman sort of stumbling around in this factory, I thought was very indicative of those old Fleischer cartoons.
Who cares? It's just cool. It's
it doesn't make sense. Like, it's just a setting. It's a factory in Gotham.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. But visually speaking, it's like, oh, this is a cool setting. I remember that being a fun spot, like as a kid, like playing with Batman figures. Like, oh yeah, they're back in that factory again for some reason. But yeah, like for score wise, I think mostly because everything is pretty consistent, even though there are some, I would say, some lulls here and there. I also loved the fact that Penguin got like a special hat and scarf since he was piloting the helicopter. The fact
like
the artists were like
Snoopy, like Red Baron.
They're like, this episode, goggles. Penguin gets a funny hat. Love it. So there were some little cute little things in there that were fun. The red eyes, and as you mentioned, Liam, the red visuals, sort of the point of view shots of Batman. Even though some of them, or most of them, I feel like were static images that they just sort of moved the camera a little bit. A lot of them are just the painted backgrounds. There's a couple, Alfred and Leslie, and then him versus the guy when they're kind of on that conveyor belt where he has to swing up and pull him down. They were animated, but a lot of them are just sort of static images that move around, but are effective because they splice in that sort of fuzzy static that comes in to sort of break up the visuals. So overall, I liked it, despite not having a lot of action. I think the dogfight is pretty good. I ended up giving a 7 out of 10 for visuals. What about you, Liam?
Yeah, and I went just one tick higher. I went 8 out of 10. I think that last act where from the dogfight and then that last fight scene in the factory is pretty dramatic. So I liked these quite a bit. What about you, George?
I'm gonna be generous. I'll give it an 8 because it's Batman. Visually, they know what they're doing. It's fine. It's an 8.
Yeah, no, I think it's fair to say it's maybe not the best episode. It's maybe not, if someone was asking you, like, as an artist, what's like the number one episode you'd put on, this one would probably maybe not be in like the top 30 that you would think to mention. But hey, it's still got some cool stuff in there. All right, that will bring us on to our third category, which of course is music. We have music by Steve Chesney and James Stemple this week. I'll be honest, guys, I don't have a ton in the way of music notes this week. They don't really rely on either the sort of the classic Batman themes very much, nor the Penguins has his own character theme. And I don't think
he has a theme, doesn't he? And I didn't catch it in this.
Yeah, I don't think they really use it. I think they use sort of the more just sort of traditional, like more like kind of it's exciting and fast paced. The action beats near the end with the dogfight is fun, but I didn't have a ton of notes. What stood out to you, Cal?
I think opening up, as we mentioned, we have this weird ceremony, and it's obviously supposed to be this military presentation. There's some like generic military-esque, like, oh, we're the American Army, and we're standing here, and we're sitting here enjoying these amazing weapons. Like, there's some like semi-patriotic music playing in the background. I thought that set the tone for the scene pretty well, and then it shifts once the Raven obviously has been hijacked. There's this shift in the music to a more attention heavy and driving music. But to me, I think mostly most of the music notes came in the dogfight scene between the Batwing and the Raven, especially after the Batwing takes some damage and is, he's trying to maintain control of this. And as you mentioned, he's trying to sort of balance, keeping the bat plane from crashing, but also he's losing his vision and it's smoking. And, we didn't even mention it, but there are some pretty cool visuals as he's flying around, like trying to keep the bat plane from colliding in with some of the industrial elements of that area. But so I think the music is highlighted there. And then ultimately after he gets out, and when Penguin and I believe it's Falcone is the henchman that reappears this week again, but they're sort of noticing that something's off with Batman, and you have almost like this tragic, almost like Bill Bixby, Incredible Hulks type music that's playing in the background as Batman is like stumbling over things and like trying to find his way. It's like very tragic that he's blind. But as they sort of come to the realization that he's injured, and Batman is sort of feeling his way up the steps and into this factory, the music sort of adds to that sort of, oh no, what's going to happen to Batman? Batman's in trouble. And then eventually, I think also as he escapes the Penguin after they have their initial scuffle, and as he's sort of walking down this hall, unbeknownst to him, passing the exit on his right and headed towards this lava of this burning lava, the music sort of, oh no, kids, look out, Batman just missed the exit. Oh no, he's headed to his doom. So created a little bit of tension there. I didn't have a whole lot of notes otherwise. There is, I think, one instance where they play the Batman theme sort of triumphantly at the end, but it's not a whole lot. And it just feels like a lot of generic sort of scene filler music. Nothing offensive, nothing that I felt distracted or necessarily took away from the story, but nothing that was sort of memorable, or as you mentioned, they didn't stick with the normal villain music. We didn't have the Penguins theme come in. So I just went with sort of a middle of the road 6 out of 10 for this. I did like the dogfight music.
Yeah, they do actually. I think in that dogfight there is a little bit of the main theme. The Danny Elfman, Michael Keaton Batman theme is actually kind of incorporated, which they didn't because there was this sort of sub theme that was created for the series with Shirley Walker, the main composer. The original sort of Keaton Batman theme that's used for the opening title sequence, I don't think we hear that too often in the main episodes, and so it was interesting to kind of hear that brought in lightly in during that dogfight. It's played very softly and just like on strings, but I thought it kind of added a little bit of extra excitement to that sequence. So unsurprisingly, I am right in that same ballpark with you, Cal. I gave it a 5 out of 10. What about you, George?
I'll give it a 5 because, like I said too, I almost forgot half of it. I love the tragic music when he's like stumbling. I thought that kind of at least helped tell the story. And hearing the Batman theme in it. I would have loved Penguin's theme a bit more because it has a nice unique sound to it. It's not like some of the other ones are a bit too strong, like the Joker one, or or the which is very like kind of I don't know, like eccentric and or the Two-Face one, which is very creepy. It's Penguin's one does kind of have a kind of sort of like heavy beat action vibe to it anyways, at least the one that I'm thinking, unless I'm thinking of a different one. But so I'm surprised they didn't. I'll go with a 5. I'll just kind of go in the middle there, just because I don't remember anything kind of. For me, it was like you guys said, the visuals that really certain key visuals that worked, that sold it on me, not so much the musical moments.
Agreed.
Makes sense. And that will bring us to our final category here, which of course is voice acting. Not a huge cast to talk about this week. We do briefly have Bob Hastings as Commissioner Gordon, Robert Costanza as Harvey Bullock, Lloyd Bachner as Mayor Hill gets a little bit to do this week. And of course, we do have Diana Mulder returning as Leslie. But kind of our main people of the episode are, of course, we have Efren Zimbalist Jr. as Alfred, kind of being the stern lecturer to give that, Batman's in no condition to go into the field, and Leslie kind of takes on some of that as well. But then, of course, we do get a lot of both Kevin Conroy's Batman and And of course, George, as you already mentioned, we have Paul Williams playing the Penguin. And I like I said earlier, I think in our plot, I love how sinister Mr. Williams is as Penguin, especially in that last act when he kind of slowly begins to realize. First, he just thinks Batman's been injured in the plane crash. But then when he specifically zeroes in that he can't see it, it kicks into another level, and he's so sinister, but it doesn't go too over the top and cartoony. I love Mr. Williams' performance, especially in this week's episode.
Should I jump in? I just think all these voice actors are just so perfect. They're so great. I mean, obviously Kevin Conroy, and then I already mentioned Penguin. I love the guy that does Commissioner Gordon's voice. I love the woman that does Leslie's voice. Same with the guy that does Bullock. I love it. The mayor guy, perfect for that the way that character design looks. I mean, that all around. I mean, in a story like this, where a lot of it is the dialogue that's kind of guiding it as well, I thought they were all exceptional. I loved it.
Yeah. I think there's that sort of like maternal worry in Diana Mulder as Leslie, like where she's really not up for, like, she makes a point of telling him that means no Batman for a couple of days while he's got these bandages on his eyes. It's like it's very maternal in her concern for him, and then as she's building him this contraption to let him see, she's still kind of very stern and is making sure to let him know that she doesn't think it's a good idea, and he's sort of being a little bit defiant of his two kind of parental figures in Alfred and Leslie, who are both pretty concerned about him going out into the fields when he's so vulnerable. So I think that kind of creates a nice, like, a little family dynamic, and the three voice actors there do a great job.
I love when Bruce, like right after Leslie walks out and Bruce is like, no, I have to be Batman. Like, I have to stop this. And he and Alfred have this little interaction.
So keep him home, Alfred, even if you have to hog tie him. He needs to rest, which means the Batman is off duty too.
No way, Leslie. Not as long as the Penguin has that chopper.
If there is some question, Master Bruce, I urge you to resolve it straight away. You've a call on your private line.
Then let's go.
In your condition, sir?
If you think a little inconvenience like this is going to stop me.
Indeed.
And Ephraim Zimbalist Jr.'s delivery of the line, it's just like a pause, and he goes, indeed. It's so perfect. It's absolutely perfect for that, for that delivery. I mean, we've done a ton of these episodes already and talked about how great Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. is, and obviously the great Andrea Romano with the casting choices for this series and many of the other DCAU series they're just perfect. It's hard to imagine these characters sounding like anybody else. But Liam, I think you're on to something with Paul Williams getting a chance to really, the other episodes, Penguin is more of like he's not a straight up comedic character, but if you think about I've Got Batman in My Basement or Birds of a Feather, he's played as the butt of a joke, or the episode itself isn't really that serious. So this is the first episode where he really feels like an actual threat towards Batman, and ultimately it's his last episode that we really get. I feel like because after this he sort of starts going towards the reformed area, so he's not really a straight up supervillain after this episode. So it's interesting that this episode culminating with that scene between him and Batman on that ledge, and Batman sort of having to outsmart him, and him having this interaction with him and delivering the line, the name of the episode, "You're blind as a bat." He just delivers it with such gusto and enthusiasm, but not venturing over into that mustache twirling Saturday morning cartoon villain.
Your aim appears to be a little off today, Batman. I don't think you can hit the broadside of a barn, let alone the broadside of this bird.
You're blind as a bat, sightless and helpless.
Got one right.
Yeah, I think the voice acting, it's hard to find fault with anything in this episode. So I went with a very strong 9 out of 10 for my score. What about you?
Yeah, I went with actually, believe it or not, a perfect score, a 10 out of 10. Just because of, that's right, we have the special sound effect and everything. But yeah, that's I think just off the strength of, I think this is Paul Williams has a lot of great moments as Penguin, in episodes like Almost Got Him or Birds of a Feather, but like you said, Cal, it's mostly in a lighter or more comedic, or he's sharing the spotlight with other villains. So it's cool to see, even though this episode from a narrative standpoint maybe isn't the strongest, that he gets those moments to shine, and as an actor, he gets that moment in this episode. I love that, and I think Kevin Conroy's performance as Batman and as being a little bit more vulnerable and not completely on his game is fun and unique as well. So that's why
that line when he says "I can't see," I think that line is like one of those that's in my head for forever.
Mm-hmm.
I can't see, and then that commercial.
Yeah.
That might be the line that are the most memorable part of this for me from a standpoint is Bruce staring off into space with the exaggerated look on his face as he announces that he can't see. But that's so all right, a 9 from Cal and a 10 from me. That means our special guest correspondent George, you're wrapping us up here. What score did you have for voice acting this week?
Well, I was leaning towards a 10, but now that you told me that you edit in a special sound effect, I definitely am going to say perfect 10.
I love it.
Love it. The Bruce Wayne thing, I love how in these first 2 seasons, he's just very different than when he does Batman. There is that vulnerability in general, or if it's not vulnerability, it's a softness. Am I like remembering this right? Though later on, I feel like I don't get that from his Bruce Wayne when he's redesigned. Did they have him intentionally just sound more like Batman or is it just the striking difference in the character design that makes me think that he's more tough? Or
no, they definitely toned it down for the final season, and then even occasionally when he would appear as Batman or as Bruce in Justice League or whatever later on, they definitely kind of toned that down. And I've never seen like an official reason, like in any of the behind the scenes featurettes or anything, where they were like, we decided we were going to do it, or if it's just like, well, he's a little bit older now, so we're like transitioning him into like a lower, more serious tone that he sort of as like the Bruce Wayne begins to kind of slip away a little bit more, and he's closer to this, the broken down old man we see in Batman Beyond later. Like if that was the idea behind it, if that he's just kind of older and grumpier, or if there was a specific reason. But yeah, these first 2 seasons, the original animated series run here, there's definitely a really stark difference, and it was, and I think the uniqueness, especially being that it's like the Batman voice is the real voice, and the Bruce Wayne voice is the voice he puts on. Unlike, say, like the Christian Bale Batman, where he does like kind of the scarier voice is the put on voice. It's like here, it's like his normal, and then it's that like his normal sort of deep, more.
Which would have been fine. I don't know why they just had
it's one of the weirdest things. Like
I imagine it probably because the newer ones were like part of a back-to-back with Superman, and maybe they felt they needed to differentiate him more from Clark Kent. Because the older design, the small slit black eyes, he does kind of look like Superman, doesn't he? And the softer voice. Maybe that's what it was, because they also made his eyes blue, didn't they? Like, to kind of really chisel him differently. Maybe that's what it was. But I wasn't sure if I remembered if he still sounded that way or not when I
you're spot on.
That's cool. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. All right, so that will bring us to our final scores, and tallying everything up here, Cal. I have a final score of 28 out of 40.
Nice. I ended up with a 27 out of 40.
Completely different.
George, you need us to total up your scores for you?
Were you doing it while I forgot what I
did.
Yep. I did a 4, and then I did what did I do? An 8.
I think you have 27 as well.
Okay, all right.
All right, so a pretty similar scores all around here. 28 for me, 27 from George and Cal. So this is our last little bit here we do, George, is we talk about, is this an episode that needs to, is it rewatchable? Is it important to rewatch it? If you decide you're going back through these episodes, whether the entire DC universe with Superman and Justice League and beyond, or even just Batman, does this episode get a rewatch, or is this a skip?
It's an extremely forgettable episode. It's like I even noticed in the comments when you got, I think a few people said, "Oh yeah, what was this one?" When you posted the image of, it's just I don't know what it is about, because I thought they really nailed it with Penguin, the design, the voice. I don't know what it is about this iteration where they just, it's the Penguin episodes are the only ones that are really kind of lackluster. A lot of the other stuff is so strong in this whole animated series. Even certain ones like where it's not a famous villain, and yet the Penguin episodes are always really kind of low on everyone's kind of faves list. And I don't know why that is, if the team felt him to be too boring, or if they got annoyed that the Burton team forced the Catwoman and Penguin designs on them too much to match their film too much, and that agitated, or if they just don't like the Penguin, or he's not edgy enough. I'm very curious about that.
Well, yeah, I think to your point, I think a lot of the Penguin episodes, it's kind of like it could be any villain.
Yeah,
like a couple of weeks ago this month, we reviewed The Mechanic, where he finds out that he finds the guy who builds the Batmobile and kind of holds him for ransom and sabotages the Batmobile. Like, it's fine that that's the Penguin, and like we get to see his lair with the giant rubber ducky and all that, but that's not like a particularly Penguin centric episode. Or almost got him, he's just kind of one of the guys in the crew, or Batman in my basement. It's like, it's just, there needs to be a villain to fight at the end of the episode. We can throw Penguin in here, with the exception of maybe Birds of a Feather, where it's actually a story specifically about him trying to reform and trying to get into high society and all that. Like, that's a little bit more specifically about him and about his character. But a lot of his appearances, I feel like they just needed a villain, and they looked around and went, all right, this could be a Penguin episode, and kind of tossed him in. So I think that's part of it too. It's just like a lot of his episodes maybe don't feel like they're not built around the Penguin the way like some of the, like a Mr. Freeze or a Clayface or a Harley or somebody has a lot of episodes specifically built around their character. So that I think is definitely part of it.
Yeah, I think some of it could also be that as you mentioned, just those other characters, a lot of the other characters, maybe with the exception of the Joker, there was depth behind the character. You kind of understood that their motivations, it wasn't just they're evil, they're doing these plots, Batman has to stop them. There's these different dimensions to them. Mr. Freeze is a revenge story. Clayface is also sort of a revenge story, but also this monster that feels like he can't, he can't work in the industry that he worked in. He's been hiding, he's been hiding in this industry. He has to come out and try and figure out, you have Harley, who has this undercurrent of like this, this abusive relationship that she's in and why she's stuck in it. Two-Face is, mental illness or mental health. And like, so you have these different characters that have all these like different sides to them. And then you have like the short tubby guy who just like does bird crimes. It's like, it's a little bit of a throwback to like the 60s style. Like when you have just a villain of the week that's going to do the little goofy thing. And
he was great on that one. At least he was a lot of fun, and he had the best henchmen because they were very dapper in their black bowler hats and their turtlenecks. They looked like the Clockwork Orange guys. It was, can we quickly talk about like how Gru from Despicable Me is a total ripoff of this character design?
Good call.
The scarf,
That's good. I never, the nose.
Wow. The nose, the eyes,
wow, that's great.
The body shape, but without the hair.
You just blew my mind, man. Like, I had never thought about that before, but I totally see it.
Never see the Penguin and Gru the same way again. Love it. All right. Well, we're going to wrap things up now. George, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a blast. Man, we've had a lot of fun. Hard to believe that we have to say adieu for now. But yeah, we'll give you opportunity. Obviously, you have social media. You have your own website. I know that you're working on some projects that you can't talk about right now, but I'm sure you have lots of stuff
related. But I'll just throw that teaser, but can't say anything else.
There we go.
I'll just say, spoiler alert, it's going to be good. Like that. It's going to be awesome.
Hopefully, it'll. Yeah.
I think we will speak for you and say we believe that it's going to be good because your artwork is amazing. So thanks for coming on here. If you have anything to plug, your website or your social media, please, now is the time.
Oh, now is the time to forever hold your Instagram, just Instagram. I quit Twitter like a year ago. It's just not my vibe.
Good for you.
Love Instagram. That's pretty much it. My website is just more for professional clients and stuff. I'm on Behance as well for anyone who's on Behance, in terms of creatives. I have a Tumblr, but I update it? I don't know. Nobody's on Tumblr anymore. Just Instagram. And occasionally when all this is sort of getting back to normal, I might be hitting shows again. It's harder to be in the States. I'm so sorry. I'd love to be able to go to comic conventions in the States and Canada, but it's a very expensive ticket to go from Greece all the way to, so it's mostly Europe for now. So we'll see, but that's it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us. We'll look forward to all of your work coming out, and certainly do our job to help let people know about it. And
I love them. I love you guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, George.
This was fun. Thank you.
George, thanks a lot. We look forward to working with you again. Maybe in the future we'll have you back on.
Sure, yeah, whenever you want.
All right, awesome.
All right.
Well, thank you again to George for joining us this week, Cal. I had so much fun hearing his perspective, not only on the series as a whole, his artistic origins when it comes to the character of Batman, but also his thoughts on this episode as well. Had so much fun.
Yeah, he's clearly just a fun person, a good human being, and it was an honor to have him on to discuss this episode and to hear some of his history with this, not only with Batman the character, but certainly with Batman the animated series. And check out his work. If you also Google his name, you'll probably find, because he doesn't have his entire, I don't think all of his artwork isn't on Instagram, but if you Google pretty much any title of Batman the animated series episode and then his name, you'll be able to kind of see some of that original set of artwork that he did, which is, looking at it now, undertaking such a project is just incredibly impressive. And what a great guy. What a great special correspondent for this week's episode.
Absolutely kind. He was very super funny, and he had great insight on the show that we reviewed as well, which is Blind as a Bat. So as we begin to wrap it up here, we want to thank everybody for listening, whether you do so on the Pod Tower YouTube channel, where you can find us and our friends from Tim Talk and the Watchtower database, or if you're on one of your favorite podcasts app, whether that is Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or any of the other ones, we appreciate that. If you have the time, we would appreciate it if you could give us a 5-star, or if you could give us 5 stars. And if the app allows you to leave us a review, those do really help us as far as getting our show bumped up in the search algorithms and things like that. Gets a few more people listening to the pod. You can also find merch for our podcast at DCAUreview.com. If you head there, you can find shirts or mugs or stickers or hats that you could wear, both with our logos or with certain phrases that we may have coined on this show here. So lots of stuff for you can check out. That's another way you can help us out. Or if you want a less expensive, less time consuming way to help us out, why don't you just go ahead and give us a follow on Twitter and Instagram at DCAU Review on both spaces. We appreciate people that take the time to like and retweet and reply to our tweets and comment on our Instagram posts and let us know your memories of these shows and movies that we review, these old cartoons. It's the best part of the job is getting to interact with everybody. So that, of course, brings us, Cal, to next week, which is, as people may have noticed, a 5-Saturday month. So that means it's time for another trip around the multiverse.
That's right. And we're feeling a little spooky around here. So we figured we would, 'tis the season for all things scary. So looking around at our various different Elseworlds opportunities here, we said, hey, it's spooky season. Let's watch accordingly.
That is right, Cal. We are right in the end of the spooky season, the month of October, and wrapping it up with an Elseworlds review. We will be doing the aptly titled and aptly appropriate Batman The Long Halloween Part 1. So we are splitting it into 2 weeks because it is 2 separate movies. So we will do Part 1 next week, and the following week we will look at Part 2. So we are celebrating the spooky season with a review of an adaptation of an all-time great, maybe my personal favorite graphic novel or Batman story of all time. So a lot to live up to, especially I think in my camp, but definitely excited to tackle Part 1 of The Long Halloween next week.
Looking forward to it. Advising the listeners, if you haven't done so, go ahead and, read up, go out and pick yourself up a copy, or maybe if you already have your own copy, dust it off, read the original version, and then pull up the old streaming app, because it will be streaming on HBO Max, or it's available in stores nowadays also. So pick yourself up a copy, settle in, and come back and join us next Saturday. I cannot wait.
Absolutely. But until then, I'm Liam.
And I'm Cal.
And we'll be back next week with another episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.